Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. My next guest is veteran Mr. Bill Morrison. Bill, you've been doing comics for quite a while, illustrated with Disney. You've done a lot of really cool things, too, that I'd like to get into. But one of the really awesome things that is happening right now is the adventures of Roswell, the little green men that we want to talk about, which looks like it's going to be hilarious. It's going to be a little bit of fun. But before we get into that, would love to know, how are you doing? How's your week been? What are you working on right now? Now that this is already up on Zoop.
Well, I'm doing well. I just returned from Comic-Con San Diego, and I was home for a couple of days, and I thought, there's always that thing in the back of your head that says, did I catch anything?
Yeah.
I shook a lot of hands, I met a lot of people, so am I coming out of this with COVID or maybe something else? And I thought I was fine. And then Wednesday, I we had a little rainstorm here and I started sneezing.
Oh,
And I thought it was allergy. It kind of felt like maybe the rain kicked up some stuff. And as the day went on, I realized, nope, I got something.
oh
So
no.
so I went out and I got a COVID test and I came out negative, which is
Okay, good.
great.
Yeah.
So it looks like I've just got maybe a little sinus infection. So my voice sounds funny, that's why, but I feel fine. And
Yeah.
other than
Yeah.
that,
I'm
my
glad you're
my week's
okay.
going great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're okay. I know I was able to go for I had back surgery, so I wasn't able to go like I wanted to this year. But I did see Marv Wolfman, which is always fun to see. And I saw one of his posts. He goes, "I went to San Diego Comic Con and all I got was COVID." So it looks like he got COVID. So it must have been kind of going around a little bit. A lot of people came back with the sniffles or something,
Yeah,
but it was a lot of people. That thing was packed with all H being back. It was pretty crowded.
yeah. So I count myself lucky. I'm fully vaccinated,
Good.
and I've
Yeah.
still never gotten COVID
Oh
in all
wow.
these years. Yeah, in the
Oh,
40 years or
my,
so.
my desk is wood.
Yeah,
So,
knock wood.
well, I'm happy for you. I think I've had it three times, and I had a kidney transplant about 2 years ago. So I mean, that was right after COVID. So I obviously got the first two shots, and then I got the booster, and I still got it three times. So who knows how you get it, who gets it, what? There's so many theories out there that I try not to even read of it because I don't know what's true and what's not. All I know
Yeah,
is I get it once in a while, but so far I didn't get anything. So I'm kind of happy about that from San Diego Comic Con. But I'm glad you're
good.
okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, Bill, I mean, with the history that you have within comic books, I would love to kind of just turn back the clock a little bit. As an illustrator, as a storyteller, I mean, where did this passion come from? Did it start at a really young age? And was there someone in your life, whether a parent or a teacher or a friend, that really kind of triggered that passion for storytelling and illustrating? Like, where did that start in your life?
Yeah, definitely. It started when I was 3 years old. And nobody remembers being 3 years old. I think my earliest memories are probably maybe a year later, maybe 4 or 5. But my older sister, I have a sister who's 11 years my senior, and she told me that one day we were sitting at the kitchen table. She got out some paper and some crayons, and she drew a little stick man. And she said, Billy, I want you to draw what I just drew. Just copy what I did. And she said, I'm going to go away for 10 minutes. And when I come back, I want to see what you did. And apparently I said, okay. And I looked at her drawing and I started doing my own drawing, but I realized that people are not sticks. Like an arm isn't a stick, it's got a width. Uh, and so I drew like a full figure and I added details that weren't in her drawing, facial details and clothing. I gave the figure a shirt and a belt and pants and shoes. And so anyway, it apparently my drawing was beyond what she had done.
Yeah.
And she came back and she looked at my drawing and she kind of flipped out and she declared right there, she said, "Oh my God, you're going to be an artist." And from that point on, no matter what I was into, when I first discovered Batman, or when I was into Peanuts, Snoopy and Charlie Brown and the Peanuts gang, or Archie, or Universal Monsters, whatever phase I was going through, she would get like these big sheets of newsprint paper, and she would say, "Okay, here's how you draw the Wolfman." And she'd like look at the model, the Aurora model that I had on my shelf, and she would draw it. And that kept me going. And the fact that I had somebody, an older person in my life who I respected, who I admired, telling me constantly that I was going to be an artist, and just reinforcing that, I never doubted it. I mean, I basically grew up knowing that that was what I would be someday.
Yeah. That's amazing, especially coming from a family member like that, the connection that you would have. Um, when did you start to, from an illustrator standpoint, figure out that comic books was the right platform for you to share that expression of art? Like, why comics and why not something else, right?
Yeah. Well, I was bitten by the comic bug via Batman. So I was the right age when the Batman TV show came on the air, and I went berserk. I mean, I was a bat freak. I mean, we were a big family, 6 kids,
Wow.
and a modest income. And my parents didn't have a ton of money, but whether I had allowance to spend, or I could cajole some kind of bat merchandise out of my parents by whining and begging, whatever it was, like I had my bedroom was like kind of festooned with bat stuff. And part of that was comic books. And I remember my dad taking me, I'd seen comic books prior to that. Like my cousin had a stack of comics, and when I went to his house, I would look at them. Uh, and I knew a kid down the street who had a collection of comics, but I didn't really have my own comics until after Batman premiered, and my dad took me to one of the local bookstores. It was like a family bookshop. Back then, comic shops didn't exist. So if you got comic books, they were from a drugstore or a bookstore. And this particular bookstore had a couple of spinner racks. And I remember the first comic my dad bought for me was World's Finest number 165. So it was Batman and Superman. And from that point on, every chance I got, I was buying comics. And being already knowing that I might someday be an artist of some sort, it just seemed natural. Once as a little kid, I once I figured out, oh, somebody draws these things and they probably get paid to do it. Once I figured that out, it was kind of like, okay, well, this might be something in my future.
Yeah, yeah, that's so cool. And then at what point did you did you send letters out to like DC and Marvel at a certain point? Like, how did you break into the industry? Was it very difficult or was it a little bit easier? Like, what's your story of breaking into the industry for the first time?
Well, I never wrote letters to any of the publishers, but um, I got kind of scared off from becoming a comic artist when I was in art school, because I realized that when I started really kind of researching where the publishers were, and started seriously thinking about sending samples and trying to get some work while I was in college, I realized they're all in New York, and I was terrified of New York City. Like I grew up on a steady diet of cop shows, that took place in New York, and Martin Scorsese movies, and like every depiction of New York back then was dangerous and
Yeah.
scary. So I I just started thinking, gosh, I don't know if I can really do that. I don't know if I could survive going to New York. And as luck would have it, in probably I think my third year of art school, I had a class in airbrush art, airbrush illustration. And I had this teacher, Gary Ciccarelli, who turned me on to this West Coast airbrush look that was happening out in California, in Los Angeles. And it was, things you would see on magazine covers and movie posters and record album covers and greeting cards. And it was this very glamorized, stylized um, depiction of pop culture. And I really got turned on by that. And I thought, well, maybe comics are not for me, but I'm I could see myself going in this direction. So that's where I put the focus on my portfolio. And when I got out of school, I got a job as a technical illustrator for the auto industry, which I hated and was, just boring, just drawing little car parts, but they all had to be like very precise because these are like illustrations for parts manuals and
Oh,
um,
wow.
owner's manuals. Like if you buy a car, like the illustrations in the manual, that kind of thing. And so while I was doing that in the evenings and on weekends, I would work on my portfolio. And I got it to the point where I felt like I could show it and maybe get some work. So I went out to California on a vacation, and I just spent the week showing my portfolio to, I made all kinds of appointments in advance, and ended up getting a job. Got a job offer, and I moved out to California. It was kind of a trial offer, so they were trying me out for a month. So I stayed, I slept on a friend's sofa and rented a car, and I just, you know, every day for 2 weeks, I was working at this place. And after 2 weeks, the boss took me out to lunch, and he said, I know it hasn't been a month yet, but this is working out for us. So if you want to take the job, it's yours. And you can call your wife and tell her to start packing up. So that's what I did.
That's
And
incredible. What
so that
publisher
took me,
was that, Bill?
it was an ad agency.
Oh,
The name of the agency was BD Fox and Friends.
oh,
So B period D period Fox. And it stood for Brian Fox, who was the owner, and he was a graphic designer. And the agency catered to the movie industry. So it was all movie posters, and occasionally we would do TV guide ads and things like that. But it was mostly movie poster advertising. And so I worked on a lot of big movies, but in a small way. I would do the preliminary art because I was just a young artist starting out, and I would do preliminary sketches. And if the sketch got chosen by the producers to be the final image, then the final art would go to somebody like Drew Struzan or John Alvin, or one of the more well-known illustrators. But every so often they would get a low budget job and they would throw that to me. So I would get to do posters and video cassette box art for all kinds of low budget horror movies and teen comedies and stuff like that.
do you have a favorite during that time that you worked on that maybe was passed on to somebody else, but it started with your work that you're most proud of or most fond of?
Um,
Or is it
wow,
easy to pick
yeah, I've
just
never been
one?
asked that. One of the ones I worked on was Howard the Duck, and I
Oh,
was a
yeah.
big fan of Howard the Duck, so I did sketches for that.
That's pretty cool.
Um, and it ended up going to a different illustrator, obviously. But yeah, that was one that the movie turned out to be not so great, but
It's kind of become
I was
like
excited.
a one of those movies that are now being rewatched and kind of has like a cult following. Some of
Yeah,
those movies that came out at the time didn't do what everyone thought they did, and then like 30 years later, people are rewatching, going, that was a lot better than I think we gave it credit to, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Like some horror movies are like that too, where they were so corny, and then you go back, you're like, wow, they really were kind of ahead of the time. It's just the technology wasn't there, but this is a really good movie, you know?
Well, one of those was House, and
Yeah.
that's one that I did the final poster image for.
Oh wow.
So that was of all the posters I did at that place at BD Fox, that was probably the movie that had the biggest profile.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people saw that image not only when the film was out, but also they used it on the video cassette box. So a lot of kids grew up seeing that on the shelf at their video store and going, "Oh my God, that looks really scary." And either, sneaking it when their parents weren't looking,
Of course, yeah.
or
I,
aspiring, desiring to see it.
yeah.
So that was one that I did. I worked on Return of the Living Dead.
Ooh.
I didn't do the final image, but I worked on preliminary images for that.
Another cult following. That's a comic book right now. I think
Yeah.
Tony Fleece is writing kind of a continuation of what started with that movie, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
But yeah,
Tony's doing that. I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's great.
yeah. That is so cool. I mean, that's pretty proud, though. I mean, to be able to walk into, I guess at the time it would have been a video store, and to see your art maybe on a. I mean, I would walk in and go, "Oh my goodness, that's pretty incredible." Do you have like old VHS or something like that of some of the things that you worked on that you still have in your own collection?
Yeah, I do. I have some of the boxes. I have posters that I
That's
did.
cool.
I used to have, must have sold it before we moved. I live in Michigan now, before we moved from California, but I had one of the big lobby standees for House.
Ah,
So it was huge. I mean, that the hand itself was like probably, I don't know, almost two
wow.
feet. Uh, yeah, so I've tried to keep some of that stuff to have a little archive of things that I worked on. Um,
Yeah.
but to get back to your original question, the way I got into comics was after the job at BD Fox, I went on to another studio job with an illustrator who I admired named Dave Willardson.
Mm.
And if people don't know Dave's work, probably one of the most recognizable images that he painted was the American Graffiti album cover that had the waitress on roller skates.
Yeah, that's huge.
Sexy vintage waitress. She's holding like a tray of burgers and cokes. And you can see Mel's diner in the background and the vintage cars and everything. That was Dave. So I
That's
worked for
awesome.
him. I worked in his studio, and that's where I did all the Disney stuff.
Okay.
So I went from the low budget horror movies to big budget Disney movie posters. And then the Simpsons came along, and I was asked to, uh, as a kind of on the side freelance work while I was still doing the Disney stuff for Dave. I started doing images for The Simpsons for merchandise.
Ah,
And from that, because of the fact that Matt Groening retained the publishing rights to The Simpsons, I started working on some of his publishing projects.
uh-huh.
So that included Simpsons books, Simpsons calendars, and we did a magazine that was titled Simpsons Illustrated. And that was where we first started doing comics. So we had a comics section in the magazine. And from that, we did a special issue, an annual that was all comics. And that was known as Simpsons Comics and Stories. And it was a one shot. And because of the success of that, it gave Matt the confidence to start Bongo Comics, at which point he asked me and Steve and Cindy Vance if we wanted to help him start a comic book company. So people always ask me, like, how do you break into comics? And I always say, don't do it the way I did it, because it requires a lot of luck and chance and being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
There are
No,
easier ways than the way I did it.
Yeah, it sounds like you definitely took a direction that most people did not take to break into comics, which I think is an incredible story. Now, when you were working on The Simpsons, was this when it was just like small bits on the Tracy Ullman show, or did it already have like its first few seasons as an animated series on TV?
It was during the first season and
Okay.
super early. So
Uh,
not during the Tracy Ullman years, but right after it premiered as a primetime half hour.
okay.
So I think it had only been on the air like maybe 3 weeks or a month at
Oh
the
wow.
most when I got the call to see if I wanted to contribute to the merchandise art.
Well, it wasted no time on from a marketing standpoint. I mean, obviously, it was extremely popular on Tracy Ullman. I remember sitting with my parents, and I was just waiting for that small clip of The Simpsons. And I think the first one I saw was Homer playing catch with the football with Bart and his sisters, and he was going to take them for ice cream after. And he
Yeah.
threw a long bomb, and it gets stuck in Bart's mouth, and they're all sitting in a diner having ice cream, and he has the football stuck in his mouth. That's all I remember of Tracy Ullman, and I know my parents loved that show. But that's my first experience of The Simpsons. I don't know if you remember that episode, but that
Oh yeah.
was, yeah, that was
Um,
a fun episode.
I mean, I was older, but I did the same thing. I would tune in just to see the Simpsons episodes,
Yeah.
and it was. I mean, I already knew Matt Groening at that point because the the reason I got the phone call to work on The Simpsons is because I worked with this art director at the first job at BD Fox Advertising, who was friends with Matt Groening. So the BD Fox days, that was before The Simpsons, and he was just kind of a struggling cartoonist working on his Life in Hell comic strip. But he would also make extra money writing copy for movie posters. So uh, he was friends with this art director. She brought him in to write poster copy. So I would see him around the office, and I knew he was kind of a minor celebrity because I was a fan of Life in Hell, so I knew who he was. Uh, but then it was the same art director who he put in charge of the Simpsons merchandise, who called me to work on the merchandise art.
Oh, cool. Especially I mean, you talk about iconic animated series. I mean, Simpsons has got to be at the top. And in fact, don't they have the longest running animated series ever now? I think they're going into their 35th, 36th season, if I'm not mistaken. So to
Yeah,
be
it's
able to
the
be at the front lines, Bill, is just, I mean, how cool is that? I mean, that's
yeah.
just pretty awesome. Yeah.
I mean, I was there almost at the beginning.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've seen a lot. Uh, I've seen it go through a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Um, I did. I don't. I don't. I don't know what the percentage of the merchandise art is that I did, but at one point I was pretty much doing everything because there was that huge wave of merchandise at the beginning of 1990, and then by the end of 90, going into 91, it starts to wane a little bit.
Mm.
So but by then I was already working for Fox. So I was their in-house guy doing all of the merchandise art. So very little of it got farmed out at that point to freelancers. So for a while I was really doing everything. And so fans, collectors now will come up to me and they'll say, so did you do this image? Did you do this video game box? Yep, did that. A book just came out that's all Simpsons, collecting the Simpsons. So it's like pretty much every piece of merchandise you can imagine. And I can go through the book, and most of the images in the book are things that I did.
That's
Uh,
so cool.
so yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I bought a house off of the money that came from all the jobs. It was a lot of work. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, um, so yeah, 1990, there was actually a store in Westwood near the UCLA campus that was just the Simpsons store. They sold nothing but Simpsons merchandise.
Which most of it came from your art. A lot of it did,
Yeah,
illicit. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
So it was like, there are things throughout history. There's, Beatlemania, there's the mania
Yeah,
over Elvis Presley, Batmania in 1989. Um, so there are certain things where pretty much the whole world got excited about, you know, one particular property, and you saw all this merchandise and all this
yeah.
interest and enthusiasm, excitement around it. And The Simpsons is definitely one of them.
Oh, 100%. I mean, big part of my I'm 49, so I don't know how old I was watching Tracy. I don't even know if I should have been watching Tracy Ullman. I can't remember if my parents really wanted me to watch that, but they let me watch the Bart Simpson parts for sure because they knew I thought it was just the funniest thing ever. But then obviously growing up on that show for so long, and then I had the pleasure of having, I don't know if you know Matt Schofield, who is the director of storyboards now for The Simpsons and has been for the last 25 years. He also has a comic book that he just wrote, which is a comedy called Steamroller Man. It's a superhero and his head is a steamroller. It's the silliest thing ever, but it's hilarious. But anyways,
Okay.
I digress. But he's been on it, and I had him on, and we were just geeking out over The Simpsons. And then you get to meet you, and you're at the very beginning because you were working on it 10 years before he was, if not longer. Because he didn't. I mean, 25th year, so they're going into the 36th season, I think. So, man, I mean, the impact that you had on that brand as it was exploding is just phenomenal. I mean, how incredible is that?
Well, it's really rewarding, especially now
Yeah,
that so many adults that I meet at conventions or at store signings who are roughly your age, so they
yeah,
were kids when The Simpsons was, just kind of exploding. Um, and when you're a certain age, like when I was a kid and it was Batman, it doesn't matter how uh like I'll see things that are really cheesy that were, done when I was a kid, whether it was Batman or like I looked at the Josie and the Pussycats cartoon a few years ago, and I remember really thinking that was great as a kid. I look at it now and it's just like, oh my God, it's so bad. But still you have that nostalgic connection
yeah,
to it. So no matter how bad it is, it's a part of your DNA. It means a lot to you. And
yeah,
then if you have a show that was really good, I
yeah,
mean, you can still look back at those early Simpsons episodes and go, man, those are still hilarious.
yeah,
Uh, even more so. So,
yeah,
so I meet a lot of adults who were kids like I said, when The Simpsons was just kind of exploding, and um, they just have such a fondness for it and such a connection to it, and that means a lot to me. To know
yeah,
that I was part of their childhood experience. And
yeah,
some kids had great childhoods and others had terrible childhoods, and maybe The Simpsons was their one island of relief,
yeah,
where they look forward to watching that, and that would give them an escape from whatever horrible situation they were in. And
yeah.
I've met those people too, and it means even more to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially if it's an escape from something devastating that you have to go through. I can only imagine the impact. I'm
Yeah.
fortunate that I don't have those kind of experiences, but they do exist. And in your situation, you get to meet them and to be able to probably look in their eyes and see what it meant to be able to escape. And I think comic books in general, and even the genre that we're talking about today, is escapism, whether it's from negative things or you want to get away from politics like today. Sometimes I just want to go to comic books so I don't have to hear about politics, right? There's a lot of different things that comic books mean to a lot of different people. But I
Yeah.
think the one thing that we all agree on is that it is a way to jump into another world and just forget about where you're at. And I think that's one of the things that I love comic books for. And like you said, it's triggered by a lot of different things. But it is escapism, and I love it for that.
Yeah. And when I was in advertising, I loved advertising. I had a good time because I got to paint images that were fun and exciting for me. But uh, I still wanted to entertain people, and I always felt like advertising, like even if I'm having good time with what I'm doing. The main point of what I'm doing is to sell somebody something. And sometimes you're selling a product that's great and you can really get behind it and you're excited about it. But sometimes you're selling a product that you're not that crazy about and you have to try to make it attractive to people. And it's a little bit distasteful because it's like, well, I wouldn't buy this product, but I'm, spending my time and effort to try to make other people do that. And I always felt like, if I could get into comics like I wanted to initially as a kid, it it's all entertainment. I'm not trying to sell somebody something. I'm trying to give them an entertaining experience.
Well, I could talk to you about The Simpsons all day because it has such a big impact on my upbringing. But you've worked on some other pretty impressive titles as well on the Disney side and outside of the Disney side. What came after this? Like, where did Disney kind of fall in place? Because you've worked on like every major title that my kids grew up on. And I grew up on, whether it's Lady and the Tramp. I mean, some very classical Disney properties. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how that kind of
Sure.
fell in?
Yeah. Well, so the Disney stuff was pre-Simpsons,
Okay.
uh, and or most of it was. I've done Disney work since then, but when I was doing the movie posters, it was prior to the Simpsons being created. And the first poster I did was for Cinderella, and I was working, like I said, I was working with Dave Willardson, and when he hired me, uh, we had all kinds of different advertising accounts, and not just advertising, but we did magazine illustration, we did product illustration. So I did labels for Nestle's Quick, I did ads for Maxell audio tape. Um, I did all kinds of things, but one of the accounts that we got was Disney feature film. And they came to the studio I think because of an illustration that Dave had done some years before of Goofy, and it was for one of the theme parks. So I think it was an ad for Disney World in Florida. And it was, a lot of the Disney advertising up until then, like if you saw a Disney movie poster, it looked more like the film. It was flat. There wasn't like a lot of lighting effects, shadows and light and rendering on the characters. It looked like the film. So you'd have like kind of a lushly illustrated background, but then the characters were all flat because it was just cell animation. So it was, just painting flat colors on acetate. And what Dave had done this image, or he might have been working with another illustrator to do it, but it was this illustration of Goofy it looked more like what we think of now as a 3D animated cartoon. It looked real. It was rendered. It had, highlights and shadows, and it looked fully round. And they wanted to move into that look for the movie advertising. So they came to Dave and they said, we want you to do a poster for Cinderella because we're re-releasing it into theaters. And this was a time when uh, rather than just releasing the films, like the classic films, onto video, they would first re-release them into theaters and give them a theatrical run, and then it would come out on video. Now all the classics just go straight to video. And it's really only the new ones that come out in theaters. But back then it was totally different. So they needed a poster every time they came out with a classic film in theaters. So I did the first one for Cinderella. I actually did two, and then I don't remember what the next classic was, but I ended up doing over the handful of years that I was there. I did Peter Pan, The Jungle Book, Lady and the Tramp, Fox and the Hound, Robin Hood, um, Bambi. So
Wow.
I did a lot of the old classics, and then I also did new ones like The Little Mermaid, and Rescuers Down Under, um, Roller Coaster Rabbit, which was a Roger Rabbit short, The Prince and the Pauper, which was a Mickey Mouse featurette.
Yeah.
So I got to do the new stuff and the old stuff, and then came the ancillary stuff like Happy Meal boxes and
Yeah.
McDonald's point of purchase displays, like for their menu boards and that kind of thing.
How cool is that? Anywhere
Yeah,
you go into a McDonald's, there's your art. I mean, I think that is
yeah,
wild, man. It's really hard to kind of fit in your head that you're walking into a McDonald's and a Happy Meal has your art on it. That's, I don't know, kind of an out of
yeah,
body experience, I would think, as an artist to be able to see you in a bazillion McDonald's. But that is so cool, man. So
yeah. It
cool,
was
Bill.
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right, let's jump back into Boingo, right? So you have the Simpsons. You have, was it Futurama? Was that part of Boingo too, right?
Futurama came later, so we started Bongo in
Okay.
1993,
Okay. Yeah.
and like I said, it came out of the Simpsons Illustrated magazine.
Hmm.
So we did the one shot, and then we launched Bongo, and initially we had Simpsons comics, Radioactive Man, which was a limited series, 6 issues, Bartman, and Itchy and Scratchy.
Oh, okay.
And we realized Itchy and Scratchy didn't work as a comic because if we made it as violent as it was on the show,
Yeah.
um, we got a lot of negative complaints from parents
Yeah.
because it's different. Like if you see it in animation, it goes by and it's gone. Like
Yeah.
you see the blood, but then it's over. But on
Yeah.
comic, you see the blood and then you keep seeing it and you keep seeing it. And it's just there. But
Yeah.
if we tried to tone it down, then the fans hated it. They
Yeah.
were like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not, it's watered down, itchy and scratchy. So we decided, you know, better leave that to the TV show and not really do it as a comic book. Bart Simpson, we continued. It had a little hiatus, but then we brought it back. And then we brought Radioactive Man back uh, a few years later. Um, and then Futurama, once the show started, I was involved in the development for the show. Matt Groening brought me in uh, kind of on the side from my bongo duties to help him visualize the world, the characters, etc. before he pitched it to Fox.
Yeah.
So I helped him with the pitch, and then he pitched it. They bought it, and what ended up happening was he wanted Bongo to be in the same building as the Futurama production offices. So Fox was putting Futurama in a one of their ancillary buildings, not on the Fox lot. It's actually the Fox Sports building, uh,
Oh.
but they had a floor that was vacant. So
Yeah.
it's actually where Marvel used to be. Marvel
Oh,
production
really?
was there. Yeah. I ended up inheriting Stan Lee's furniture, his office furniture.
No way.
Yeah.
Were you able to keep any of it after you
I
moved out?
did.
Like,
Yeah.
no way.
Yeah. And it was all spiderweb themed, it's like bookshelves and a video cabinet and tables.
So
Uh,
when you're working on stuff now, are you sitting in his chair at his desk as you're working?
no, no.
Oh, okay.
I ended up when we left that office when Futurama ended. So I'm getting ahead of myself. I became the art
Yeah, no
director on
problem.
the show.
I'm jumping all around too. I'm just so excited to
Yeah.
talk about these things. Sorry, Bill.
So I became the art director on the show because of my involvement with developing the characters or helping Matt develop the characters prior. So for the first 4 years, I was the art director on the show, but I was also still running Bongo or running the creative aspects of Bongo. Uh, and then when Futurama was canceled, we had to move out. And I went to the building manager and I said, I'd really like to keep that uh, spider web furniture that's, with Stan Lee's. Is there any way I could keep that? Could I like buy it from you? And she said, well, we're not really set up to take payments. So nah, I can't really sell it to you. But she said, you know what? If you trade me something cool, I'll let you leave with it. And I said, well, what would you like? And I had done some future or some Simpsons prints at the time that were like gallery prints, limited edition things. And she said, well, I saw those in your office. I'd really like a couple of those. And if you could sign them and maybe do a little head sketch. And I said, done. So I got to take those with me to the next building that we moved to, which was a building that Matt purchased in Santa Monica. And that was where Bongo was for a number of years. So I had an office and I had my furniture in there. And when the building was being renovated, and I actually, this all kind of happened at the same time. The building was going to be renovated, like they were making new offices. It was when Matt was starting Disenchantment,
Mm.
and he started to work on that, and he wanted to have the production offices for Disenchantment in the same space as Bongo. So they were starting to like take down walls, put up walls, that kind of thing. So we all had to move out and work at home for a while. And at the same time, I was kind of moving on from Bongo to work on Disenchantment with Matt. So I didn't really have an office there anymore. And I didn't have any place at home
Mm.
to store this furniture. So I ended up regretfully selling it
Oh
to
no.
to a collector. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
no, I don't
at
have it
least you
anymore.
had it for a while. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, how cool is that you had it for a while? I mean, that's amazing. That's incredible. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I was able to go to San Diego Comic Con, like I said, just for a couple days, but the backpacks that they gave us, some of them were Futurama backpacks. I mean,
Yeah.
how surreal is that watching thousands of people walk by with a backpack with your art probably on it or your inspiration or something to do with Bill on there? I mean, that's so crazy. Did you sign any of those?
I did. I
Yeah.
signed a couple of those. I didn't do the art for that.
Okay. Yeah.
I did do a piece of art that was around Comic Con that was for Hulu.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I worked on it with Shaban Christescu and Mike Rote, two of my former Bongo compadres.
Yeah.
So I just did the pencil line art, but it was a big Hulu ad that showcased Simpsons, Family Guy, Futurama, American Dad, Bob's Burgers, Solar Opposites, The Great North, and Hit Monkey. So I got to draw all those characters, all those properties.
How cool is that? I mean, I went by Hulu a couple times, so I had no idea I was looking at something that you did. That's incredible.
Yeah.
How fun is that, man? That is awesome, Bill. Incredible. Well, I mean, obviously, I remember, just going through a little bit of your history. Was it 2005 when Bongo kind of you announced at Comic Con that that would be ending? I thought it was 2000. I could be wrong on the date.
No, it was later than that. It was
Oh,
2018.
18. Got you. Yeah, I was way
Yeah,
off. Way off.
that was when
Yeah, yeah.
Bongo folded.
So let's talk a little bit about your current project then, because where does this start? Is this a story that you've been kind of sitting on for a long time and you just felt like the timing was right? Or like how did you come about this idea and this project that we want to talk about on Zoop right now?
Well, in a way, Roswell actually started with Bongo. So back in kind of the mid 90s, Matt told me and a couple of other artists that were working for Bongo that if we had an idea for a comic, something we wanted to do that was creator owned, but our own thing, separate from The Simpsons, uh, he said, pitch it to me. And if it seems right for Bongo, then we'll do it. So it took me a couple of years, but I finally came up with the idea for Roswell and I pitched it to Matt and he liked it. So we started publishing Roswell comics uh, and did 6 issues. And well, we did a preview story that was in the back of Simpsons comics. So that's where it first appeared.
That's where it started then, huh?
Yeah. So it was in the back
Yeah.
of 4 issues of Simpsons comics. It was like one introductory story. And then it launched in its own series. So I did 6 issues, and then Futurama came along. And like I said, Matt wanted me to help him develop the show. And then I became art director, and I'm still doing my regular editing and creative work at Bongo. So it just had to go. There was just no
Yeah,
way I could do my Bongo work and work on the Futurama show and do Roswell.
yeah,
So for all these years, I've been wanting to bring it back. And almost every convention I go to, or if I do a store signing, there's almost always a person who comes up and asks me about Roswell and says, "When is
yeah,
Roswell coming back? I loved it."
yeah,
In the early days, it was, I miss it. I love it. I read it a couple of years ago and I want it to come back. And now I read it when I was a kid
yeah,
and I really want to see it come back. So, um, now we have this amazing thing called crowdfunding.
yeah.
And it just so happens that Bongo, because Bongo doesn't exist, they they issued a quit claim on Roswell, which a quit claim is a legal term for a document that just basically gives me back the
Oh,
rights to my property. Now, I've always had the right, like I said, it's creator owned. So I've always had
yeah.
the rights to do new Roswell stories, but until now, I've never had the rights to republish the Bongo material.
Ah,
So if a publisher wanted to do that, they would have to make a deal with Bongo. It adds extra costs, et cetera, et cetera. So there were a few publishers over the years who expressed an interest in publishing Roswell, but they wanted to first come out with a collection of the existing material from Bongo and then use that as like an introduction to the new material.
yeah,
Um, but those always kind of fell through because of the cost. And now I don't have that roadblock. So
yeah.
I have the rights to publish it, all the original material plus new stuff. So it's kind of like the
Congratulations.
planets aligned, and
Yeah,
now's the time. You know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's perfect. I mean, crowdfunding. I obviously I go to my comic book store every Wednesday and I got my pull box of my favorite comics, but I find myself spending more time on sites like Zoop, Kickstarter, Fund My Comic, Indiegogo, just because of the unique stories that are being told in the indie space that is obviously much different than Batman. And I love Batman, so I still read Chip Zdarsky and I'll continue to read whoever takes over when he's done, but I'm really loving this whole world of independence where you're getting just unique stories. I don't think there's enough comedy comics out in the world. So I would love to see more fun comics that make you giggle as you're reading. And this is definitely one of those comics that I think you'll get a chuckle out of. And obviously, this background of experience that you have on all these other amazing IPs. I mean, I'm assuming that some of those had an influence on Roswell and some of those comedy effects within that, right?
Oh yeah, I mean when I was initially doing Roswell, I was sort of coming into my own as a writer, I think, because I written a number of Simpsons comics stories, but I'd never really done my own thing. And so Roswell was a lot of trial and error, just experimenting and trying to see what I could do with my own ideas and my own creations. Um, and since then, I've created a couple of other series, and I've worked on other properties like the Beatles, and I've edited Mad Magazine, and so yeah, I think that experience under my belt is definitely going to color what I do with the new ongoing Roswell series. So once that comes out, after this initial collection of the existing material, um, I've written stories over the years that are just kind of tucked away. And when I kind of dust those off, I'm probably going to look at them and go, I wrote that 10 years ago and now I think I'm a better writer. So I'm going to rework this and, just do some nips and tucks. But yeah, all that experience definitely comes into play. And
Yeah.
I think with my experience with Mad Magazine, um, I think more about satire
Yeah.
than I used to. So I think with Roswell there'll be a lot more. I think I'm going to find a lot of ways to just make satirical comments on things from our current culture, even though it takes place back in the 40s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know, you just develop different chops, and
Yeah.
so I think all of that will come into play.
Yeah. I mean, in the news, no problem. Yeah. In the news, so much is coming out with UFOs and pictures of UFOs from, the military, jet um, pilots seeing weird things. Like, there's so much more I think that you could take from a satire standpoint and bring it in. The president of the United States releasing all kinds of information and other countries jumping in. I feel like the world around Roswell has opened up so much for you to be able to add. I mean, I think you could tell stories for the next 10 years with all the crazy things that we're hearing right now.
Oh yeah, I watch those shows too. I watch
Yeah.
I love the caught on camera shows like paranormal
Yes.
caught on camera, and they always have a segment that shows people's videos of
Yeah.
UFOs and stuff. And yeah, there's uh Roswell really isn't about aliens,
Hmm.
um, but I use aliens as a way of telling the stories because they're fun, they're interesting, they're exciting. Because of the fact that we don't know whether they really exist or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I think some people know, some people have had
Yeah.
experiences and they're positive that they exist, and other people are skeptical. But as a population, we've never really we haven't yet come to accept that aliens are real.
Right.
It's not something that everybody just accepts because
Yeah.
we don't see them every day. But if we did, like if suddenly aliens revealed themselves and we saw them every day, they'd become normal and boring.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that there's mystery
Yeah.
and there's an uncertainty about it because that's what makes the stories fun.
100%. Like, I actually don't want to know. I think the fun is seeing these videos and the
Yeah,
speculation around that. I mean, I think that's a better story than if actually an alien actually landed and walked out, right? Because it would make huge news. But like you said, after that, oh, now what? We know they exist.
yeah, yeah,
There's fun in kind of those thoughts of what's going on here, right?
yeah. Every time I see one of those videos, whether it's a ghost thing or
Yeah,
chupacabra or cryptids or whatever, you know, I can get a feeling like a chill up my spine,
yeah,
because sometimes they're so amazing. It's like, oh my God, there's like video of this thing, but then there's a voice in the back of your head that's like, yeah, but they could have faked it.
yeah, yeah,
It could be special effects, it could be Photoshop or whatever.
yeah.
So that mystery, that uncertainty keeps it fun.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's going to get worse with AI and everything that's happening around AI. You're seeing videos of like famous people like pushing ads for products
Yeah,
that like they're using their voice. It looks real. And you're like,
yeah,
is Joe Rogan really pitching this hat brand that I've never heard of before? And of course he's not, right? Or whoever it might be, right? You're just like,
yeah.
yeah, this is kind of scary territory that we're in a little bit with the technology. There's been a couple of videos of Bigfoot walking through the forest, and now you start to wonder, like, what is going on here, man? What to believe, what not to believe, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Which is fun. It's a
you
fun.
don't know if you can believe your eyes anymore
Yeah,
because of the technology.
yeah,
Um, but getting back to what I was saying about Roswell,
yeah.
um,
Please.
not being about an alien. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously it is about an alien,
Yeah,
but it's more for me the the alien aspect and the supernatural and the time period is all kind of window dressing. It's kind of an added layer that makes it fun and exciting. But at its heart, it's really about a character who uh, was bored with his life on his home planet and wanted to have an exciting life and see universes and worlds that that he'd never seen before. He had that wanderlust, and
Yeah.
just wanted more excitement. And when he accidentally gets that wish, that's when he realizes all I ever really wanted was my family and my home.
Yeah.
And so it's really about a character who's a fish out of water who is really just trying to get back home.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the heart of it. So it is funny. It is sometimes spooky and scary and weird, and it harkens back to 50s sci-fi movies and pinup girls and convertible Buick Roadmasters and all kinds of things, all kinds of fun stuff. But it's also a human story. It's about heart, and it's about putting importance on the things that really mean something.
Which I think most people could relate to,
Yeah,
right? Sometimes you're
everybody.
looking for something that has been in front of you the entire time. You just don't realize it until you experience something else and realize
Right.
what I thought I needed wasn't really what I needed. I had it all along. And I think that's
Yeah.
beautiful. I think that's amazing.
Look at Wizard of Oz. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what that's
exactly.
about. Dorothy
Yep. Yeah.
is bored. She's living on this farm with her aunt and uncle, and she's just stuck in the middle of Kansas in this nothing place. And then she goes to this amazing Technicolor world with all these fantastic creatures, and she has all these adventures. And all she wants to do, there's no place like home. That's all she keeps. That's what gets her back is
Yeah.
chanting that over and over again. She realizes even in this amazing place, there's no place like home.
Yeah. No, I think it's awesome. Now, as far as what we have going on Zoop, right? This is the collection of those first six issues that you were talking about. Does it also have some of the Simpsons portions added as well? Were you able to capture those stories at the back of the Simpsons
Yes.
issues? Oh, that's
So it's
beautiful. So
got
you're getting everything.
it's everything that I did at Bongo, including the Simpsons 4-part preview.
Yeah.
And then I also did a couple of stories for indie publications back in the day. So it's got a story that I did. I wrote and inked, but I had Dan DeCarlo pencil it. And if people don't know who Dan DeCarlo is, he was the Archie Comics artist who created Josie and the Pussycats and co-created Sabrina the Teenage Witch and drew Betty and Veronica and all the
Wow.
Archie gang for years. Um, so he drew that story, and it's never been in color before, so it's going to be in color. And then there's another black and white thing that I did that'll be colored, and also pinups. There were some pinups that I had other artists do back then that because I had to cancel the book, they didn't see print. So those will be seen for the first time, and also some new pinups. Uh,
Yeah.
Anybody who's a fan of Mark Schultz and knows what an amazing illustrator he is, he's a
Yeah.
big fan of Roswell, and he's doing a pinup. I've got one from Eric Powell, the creator of the Goon.
Goon. Yeah. Yeah.
I've got one from Art Baltazar, who did Tiny Titans. Um, there's one from Dick Ayers, classic Marvel Comics artist. He did a pinup for me. Um, yeah, so there's some fun surprises.
That is so cool. Well, I'm going to share my screen just so everyone can kind of take a look. And we'll make sure, Bill, that we put the link below. That way we make it very easy for everyone to get to. What I love about Zoop is their links are always super simple, really easy to get to. But here it is, the complete adventures of Roswell, Little Green Man. And I love that you're capturing everything that you've done up to this point, and things that probably people never got their hands on, right? Because they weren't released at the time, or maybe they didn't get their start in Roswell through Simpsons. Maybe they got it through the first issue under Bongo. So this is awesome. When is the launch date? Are you allowed to kind of talk about the launch date yet, or are we just starting to capture people who are interested first?
Yeah, the launch is, well, we are capturing people who are interested. So if you go to the
Yep.
site, you can register your email address as you see in the field here, and then
Yep.
you will get notified as to any updates. The launch date is coming up. It's August 13th.
There you go.
So in less than 2 weeks,
Yeah.
the campaign will launch, and we'll announce all the rewards and all the packages, et cetera, et cetera. And there's going to be some fun stuff. I've got uh, Roswell products from 20 years ago that I've been sitting on. So those will be released. I've got T-shirts and magnets and posters and prints and all kinds of things.
That's so cool, man. Bill, this is incredible. Like I said, Jordan and everything the team over at Zoop has been able to do to make it easier for creators like yourself to be able to get your product out there. It's one of the only platforms that's kind of an all in one stop shop. And I could tell you from doing Kickstarters, you're appreciative of anybody that backs you. But man, if you got over 100 or 200 people that you need to send a comic to on your own, and then you have to try and beg your wife to help you with the shipping, and then she hates you for the next couple of days. Zoop is so awesome with all of that. So I'm really happy for
Yeah.
you, and I'm happy for everybody to get their hands on this. I'll definitely be signing up, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. I would love to have you back as soon as we have it in our hand. And then what is kind of your plan after we're done with Zoop? After everybody gets this into their hands and you continue this story, are you at a place where you're able to talk about how people could get a hold of new issues and new storylines, or we're not there yet?
Not quite there yet. It really
Yeah,
depends on the success of this campaign.
yeah,
So if it all goes well, I might decide to crowdfund the ongoing adventures of Roswell, or I may attract the attention of a publisher, or I may do both.
yeah.
Um, I may do two things side by side. I don't know yet. So we'll see how it
Yeah.
goes.
I mean, that's a beautiful time we're in, right? There's just so many options of getting your stories out today. So I want to be careful of saying the word easy because it's certainly not easy, but it's attainable for more people to get their stories out because of crowdfunding. Because certainly not easy. A lot of work goes into it, but it's definitely more readily available than ever before. And I think for stories like this, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, and Zoop was attractive to me because of what you said. It's I've kind of resisted crowdfunding for a while, even though I have friends who've done it very successfully. Mainly because I don't think I'm the kind of person that's really good at shipping product out. Uh, I don't have the room for pallets of boxes of books and having to, use my dining room table to package up books and address labels and send those out. That was always the thing that made me resist crowdfunding. I was just like, okay, I just want to make the book. I don't want to have to be the one that sends out all the stuff. And even though I've got, the all of uh the reward stuff, all the things that we're going to send out, all of that's here at my house. But the idea that I can just send this to the fulfillment company and then they can send it out, that was just like, wow, you know,
Yeah,
I was just kind of
life
imagining
changer, right?
myself going, okay, this guy wants this
Yeah,
package, so I got to put these 12 things here, and I got to make sure I get the right label on that. And then I've got these 5 things over here that are just the book,
yeah.
and all of that. I just thought I'm not the right person to do that because I know I'm gonna screw it up somehow.
Yeah. No, I mean, Jordan and the entire team over at Zoop have really built out an amazing business model. And for folks like yourself with the history that you have, my assumption and what I've seen on Zoop is you're going to get a lot of backers. And I think you're going to be very successful, Bill, when it comes to this title with Zoop. And the last thing you want to do is try and ship out 300 or 400 of these things to people. That's where Zoop comes in I think if you look at their business model, they really do look for folks like yourself that has this history, that they know that their services are going to be of a benefit to you, as well as, you get a small independent who's coming out with their first comic, probably not the right place for Zoop. Just because that business model, right, is probably going to cost you more than you're going to make on your crowdfunding. So that's where the other crowdfunding places are just amazing. But Zoop for you, this is, I think you already know you're going to be very happy with them handling all that side of the business. And I'm excited for you, and I'm excited for this title because, to be quite honest, right, I'm new to Roswell, but when I saw who I was going to be able to sit down with and your background, I'm very familiar with the history of what you've done for the industry. And now to be able to read something that you created that I didn't get to experience the first time around, I'm very excited to do that, Bill. So I cannot wait to get my package of my comic when it's ready. And then let's have you back on once you figure out what that next stage is, because I would love to talk about that as well. But I mean, any fan out there of all these properties, I think, certainly need to give you your flowers and all the things that you've accomplished to bring joy to people, because you've touched a lot of amazing IPs that we all grew up on. So just congratulations on your career. And I'm so happy for this and everything you're doing with Zoop. And I have a feeling you're going to be pretty successful with this.
Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
From your mouth to God's ears.
From my mouth to God's ears. Absolutely, Bill. I mean, I hope it's super successful for you. I do think it will be, but Bill, I don't know if there was anything else that we kind of left out pertaining to Roswell, pertaining to Zoop. I will put all the links below to make it very easy for people to go to. How about from a social media standpoint? Are you fairly active on social media, and what are the platforms that you prefer? And we could put those down there so people could follow you and be up to date with all the things that you're working on.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, and my Facebook page is Bill Morrison / Atomic Battery Studios.
Okay.
And then on Instagram, I'm at Atomic Battery.
Yeah. Beautiful. So we'll put those down there too. That way people could stay up to date with all the things that you're touching still, including Roswell and fingers crossed some of the news stories that you've been probably working on in anticipation of this being successful.
Well, thank you, Tommy. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the support.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I wish you the best of weekends coming up, Bill. Thank you for entrusting me with your story and everything that you're doing. And until next time, my friend, I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
You as well. And I hope your air comes back on soon.
Yeah, it's a little toasty. It's got to be over 80, but
yeah, I kind of expected you'd have that shirt off by now.
Yeah, I thought that'd be a little inappropriate, but it could be a really good story for Roswell issue 7 though. So, but I have these lights shining on me that don't help either, and one went out, and I think that was a blessing. I think that was God saying, "Let's give him a break. He's melting over here." But anyways, really appreciate it, Bill. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and would love to have you back one day.
I'd love to come back. Thanks, Tommy.
All right. Until next time, have a good one.
You too. Take care.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.